Welcome, curious minds, to a world of knowledge and discovery. Hello, fellow enthusiasts. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of Sony Music Entertainment United States. Sony Music Entertainment SME, commonly known as Sony Music, is an American multinational music company owned by Sony Group Corporation. It is the recording division of Sony Music Group, with the other half being the publishing division, Sony Music Publishing. Founded in 1929 as American Record Corporation, it was acquired by the Columbia Broadcasting System in 1938 and renamed Columbia Recording Corporation. In 1966, the company was reorganized to become CBS Records. Sony bought the company in 1988 and renamed it SME in 1991. In 2004, Sony and Bertelsmann established a joint venture known as Sony BMG to handle the operations of Sony Music and Bertelsmann Music Group BMG, but Sony bought out Bertelsmann's stake 4 years later and reverted to using the 1991 company name. This buyout led to labels formerly under BMG ownership, including Arista, Jive, LaFace and J Records, into former BMG and currently Sony's co-flagship record label, RCA Records, in 2011 and led to the relaunch of BMG as BMG Rights Management. Arista Records would later be revived in 2018. On July 17, 2019, Sony announced a merger of Sony Music Entertainment and Music Publishing arm Sony to form the Sony Music Group. The merger was completed on August 1, 2019. Sony Music Entertainment is the second largest of the big three record companies, behind Universal Music Group and followed by Warner Music Group. Its music publishing division, Sony Music Publishing, formerly Sony, is the largest music publisher in the world. Now, let's dig deeper into American Record Corporation and unveil the hidden treasures it holds within. The American Record Corporation (ARC) was founded in 1929 through a merger of several record companies. The company grew over the next several years, acquiring other brands such as the Columbia Phonograph Company, including its Oak Records subsidiary, in 1934. As we progress through this video, let's now turn our gaze towards Columbia Records. In 1938, ARC was acquired by the Columbia Broadcasting System (CBS) under the guidance of Chief Executive William South Haley. The company was later renamed Columbia Recording Corporation and changed again to Columbia Records Inc. In 1947, Edward Wallerstein, who served as the head of Columbia Records since the late years, helped establish the company as a leader in the record industry by spearheading the successful introduction of the LP record. Columbia's success continued through the years with the launch of Epic Records in 1953 and Date Records in 1958. By 1962, the Columbia Records Productions unit was operating 4 plants around the United States located in Los Angeles, California, Terre Haute, Indiana, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Pitman, New Jersey. Columbia's international arm was launched in 1962 under the name CBS Records, as the company only owned the rights to the Columbia name in North America. In 1964, the company began acquiring record companies in other countries for its CBS Records International unit and established its own UK distribution outfit with the acquisition of Oriole Records. By 1966, Columbia was renamed CBS Records and was a separate unit of the parent company, CBS Columbia Group. In March 1968, CBS and Sony formed Sony Records, a Japanese business joint venture. In this section, we'll be shedding light on CBS Records Group and its impact on our understanding of the subject. In 1971, CBS Records was expanded into its own CBS Records Group, with Clive Davis as its administrative vice president and general manager. In the years to the early years, the company managed several successful labels, including CBS Associated Records, which signed artists including Ozzy Osbourne, the Fabulous Thunderbirds, Electric Light Orchestra, Joan Jett, and Henry Lee Summer. In 1983, CBS expanded its music publishing business by acquiring the music publishing arm of MU Entertainment Company. CBS later sold the print music arm to Columbia Pictures. By 1987, CBS was the only Big Three American TV network to have a co-owned record company, with Sony being one of the developers behind the compact disc digital music media. A compact disc production plant was constructed in Japan under the joint venture, allowing CBS to begin supplying some of the first compact disc releases for the American market in 1983. In 1986, CBS sold its music publishing division, CBS Songs, to SBK Entertainment. On November 17, 1987, Sony acquired CBS Records for $1 billion. CBS Inc., now Paramount Global, retained the rights to the CBS name for music recordings but granted Sony a temporary license to use the CBS name. The sale was completed on January 5, 1988. CBS Corporation founded a new CBS Records in 2006, which was distributed by Sony through its RED subsidiary. In 1989, CBS Records re-entered the music publishing business by acquiring Nashville-based Tree International Publishing. As we embark on the next leg of our journey, let's unpack the layers of Sony Music Entertainment and examine its core elements. Sony renamed the record company Sony Music Entertainment SME on January 1, 1991, fulfilling the terms set under the 1988 buyout, which granted only a transitional license to the CBS trademark. The CBS Associated label was renamed Epic Associated. Also on January 1, 1991, to replace the CBS label, Sony reintroduced the Columbia label worldwide, which it previously held in the United States and Canada only, after it acquired the international rights to the trademark from EMI in 1990. Japan is the only country where Sony does not have rights to the Columbia name, as it is controlled by Nippon Columbia, an unrelated company. Thus, Sony Music Entertainment Japan issues labels under Sony Records. The Columbia Records trademark's rights holder in Spain was Bertelsmann Music Group, Germany, which Sony Music subsequently subsumed via 2004 merger and a subsequent 2008 buyout. In 1995, Sony and pop singer Michael Jackson formed a joint venture which merged Sony's music publishing operations with Jackson's ATV Music to form Sony Music Publishing. Moving on to the next segment, we have Sony BMG. In August 2004, Sony entered a joint venture with an equal partner Bertelsmann by merging Sony Music and Bertelsmann Music Group, Germany, to establish Sony BMG Music Entertainment. However, Sony continued to operate its Japanese music business independently from Sony BMG, and BMG Japan was made part of the merger. The merger made Columbia and Epic sister labels to RCA Records, which was once owned by CBS rival, NBC. It also started the process of bringing Arista Records back under common ownership with its former parent Columbia Pictures, a Sony division since 1989, and brought Arista founder Clive Davis back into the fold. As of 2017, Davis was still with Sony Music as a chief creative officer. Let's now enter the realm of present Sony Music revival and restructuring and discover the fascinating stories it has to tell. On August 5, 2008, Sony Corporation of America SCA and Bertelsmann announced that Sony had agreed to acquire Bertelsmann's 50% stake in Sony BMG. The acquisition was completed on October 1, 2008. On July 1, 2009, SME and IODA announced a strategic partnership to leverage worldwide online retail distribution networks and complementary technologies to support independent labels and music rights holders. In March 2010, Sony Corp partnered with the Michael Jackson Company in a contract of more than $250 million, the largest deal in recorded music history. From 2009 to 2020, Sony owned 50% of Psycho Entertainment, which operates some of the world's most successful reality TV formats, including Got Talent and The X Factor with Simon Cowell. Cowell acquired Sony's stake in 2020. Doug Morris, who was head of Warner Music Group and later Universal Music, became chairman and CEO of Sony Music Entertainment on July 1, 2011. Sony Music underwent restructuring upon Morris's arrival, with some artists switching labels and other labels eliminated. In June 2012, a consortium led by Sony acquired EMI Music Publishing, making Sony the world's largest music publisher at the time. This acquisition also reunited the common ownership of pre-1986 CBS Songs as SBK Songs catalog to Sony. Rob Stringer became CEO of Sony Music Entertainment on April 1, 2017. He previously served as chairman and CEO of Columbia Records. Sony has experienced many changes with its international labels. In February 2012, Sony Music reportedly closed its Filipino office due to piracy, and Ivory Music and Video had been handling distribution for its catalog a few months earlier in July 2011. In early 2018, their distribution deal with Ivory expired and SME resumed its operations in the Philippines, with the new offices still located in Ortigas Center, Pasig. In July 2013, Sony Music withdrew from the Greek market due to an economic crisis. Albums released by Sony Music in Greece from domestic and foreign artists would then be carried by Felgood Records. In June 2017, Sony announced that by March 2018 it would be producing vinyl records internally for the first time since ceasing its production in 1989. Reporting the decision, the BBC noted that Sony's move comes a few months after it equipped its Tokyo studio with a cutting lathe used to produce the master discs needed for manufacturing vinyl records, but added that Sony is even struggling to find older engineers who know how to make records. On February 5, 2019, a group of era musicians, including David Johansen and John Waite, filed lawsuits accusing Sony Music Entertainment and UMG Recordings, Inc. of improperly refusing to let them reclaim the rights to songs they had signed away earlier in their careers. The lawsuit cites U.S. copyright law, which gives artists who formerly bargained away their rights on unfavorable terms a chance to reclaim those rights by filing termination notices after 35 years. The plaintiffs claim that Sony and UMG have routinely and systematically ignored hundreds of notices, having taken the position that recordings are works made for hire and are therefore not subject to being reclaimed. In April 2021, the Brazilian media company Grupo Globo sold its domestic record label Som Livre to Sony Music for an undisclosed amount. It was approved by the Administrative Council for Economic Defence on November 4, 2021. The UK media company Something Else was acquired outright by Sony Music in 2021 to form a global podcast division, headed up by the Something Else principals, Steve Ackerman and Jez Nelson. The new division was to have teams in New York, LA and London. In 2022, Sony Music Entertainment acquired boutique branding and merchandising agency, Ceremony of Roses Core. Core would handle Sms branding, design, media and events. The newly acquired company would merge with Sony's existing Merc division and continue under the Core banner. The merger brought together artists like Adele, Up Rocky, and Lil Nas X under one merchandising house. According to Sony, the move will help expand their merchandising team and take artists' Merc to the next level. In January 2023, Sony Music and Alamo Records founder Todd Moskowitz launched Santa Ana, an artist and label services company. In April 2024, it was announced Sony Music Entertainment's global podcast division had acquired the Los Angeles-headquartered podcast production company, Neon Hum Media, for an undisclosed amount. As we venture forward, let's take a closer look at Sony Music Canada and its impact on our understanding. Sony Music Canada was formed when Sony Music acquired Canadian assets of CBS Records in 1990, itself formerly Columbia Records Canada in 1954. Sony Music Canada is operated by Sony Canada, which evolved from General Distributors or GENDIS, which had been founded in Winnipeg in 1954 by Albert D. Cohen, who had made a deal with Sony to market its transistor radios in the same year. Brace yourself for a deep dive into Sony Music UK as we explore its impact and relevance in our evolving narrative. Sony Music UK was founded in January 1980 and is owned and operated by Sony Music Entertainment in the United Kingdom. Since 2014, Jason Eiley has been Chairman and CEO of Sony Music UK. Though owned by Sony Music Entertainment, Sony Music UK has standalone operations in the UK to promote musicians within the UK. In June 2017, it was announced that Sony would be merging its two independent distribution companies, The Orchard and Red Essential. In 2014, Sony had its best singles success of 33 years, with 11 #1 singles. Sony Music artists won a total of 5 individual awards at the Brits 2015, including Best Female Solo Artist for Paloma Faith, and Mark Ronson's Uptown Funk, which picked up Best British Single. Several other of the label's artists, Foo Fighters, One Direction and Pharrell Williams, also collected awards. Sony's performance at the Brits 2015 was the label's best in nearly 20 years, winning a total of 5 awards. In 2017, Sony Music UK celebrated the most successful BRIT awards in the company's history, winning 7 of the 11 awards. Sony Music UK has made key acquisitions, including forming Insanity Records with Insanity Management. Craig David became the first artist to sign an album deal with Insanity Records. Sony Music UK signed Robbie Williams, who released his 11th album The Heavy Entertainment Show in 2016. Jason Eiley commented that the agreement was a once-in-a-lifetime signing with the biggest male solo artist of our generation. Sony Music UK incorporated the independent sales and distribution company Essential Music and Marketing, renamed to Red Essential. In August 2016, Sony Music acquired Ministry of Sound Recordings, home to London Grammar, DJ Fresh and Sigola. On April 5, 2017, 2 of Sony Music's labels won awards at the annual Music Week Awards. Columbia Records was awarded R of the Year, and Psycho was awarded Record Company of the Year. In 2021, Sony agreed to buy Cobalt neighboring rights division and independent distribution company AWAL from the Cobalt Music Group for $430 million. In 2024, the former members of Pink Floyd sold their entire catalog for $400 million to Sony. Previously, the band had licensed their music to Sony from 1975 to 1999 and then again from 2016 until the sale outside Europe, where the distribution was handled by EMI and later Warner Music Group. Alongside this, they had also acquired Queen's catalog and name and likeness rights for £1 billion. Sony will start distributing the entirety of Queen's music internationally outside of North America, where it remains with Disney's Hollywood Records by 2026, when their deal with Universal Music Group ends. Prepare yourself for an eye-opening discussion on Sony Music Russia in the upcoming portion of this video. Sony Music Entertainment Russia was the Russian music label of Sony Music Entertainment. The company opened its division in the Russian Federation in 1999. In 2000, the first contract was signed with the Russian group by 2. For 2021, experts estimated the company's share in the Russian recording market at approximately 15–20%. Sony Music Entertainment's revenue in 2021 amounted to 2.56 billion rubles, $42.70 million. Net profit amounted to 132.9 million rubles, $2.22 million. On March 10, 2022, In connection with Russian invasion of Ukraine, Sony Music Entertainment announced the suspension of operations and new releases in Russia, while Russian employees of Sony Music Group received pay indefinitely. On September 8, Sony Music officially announced its final withdrawal from Russia. The company recalled all foreign catalogs from the Russian streaming services Yandex Music, Zvuk and VK Music, and tracks from BMG, Britney Spears, Bring Me the Horizon and many other artists were removed. The Russian division is intended as a completely independent structure from Sony Music to represent only local musicians under the new brand Kiskola, which was later bought by the structures of former top managers of Warner Music Russia. In the upcoming section, we'll be dissecting CD price fixing and exploring its intricate connections to our topic. Between 1995 and 2000, music companies were found to have used illegal marketing agreements such as minimum advertised pricing to artificially inflate prices of compact discs. This was done in order to end price wars of the early years among discounters such as Best Buy and Target. A settlement was reached in 2002 that included music publishers and distributors Sony Music, Warner Music, Bertelsmann Music Group, EMI Music and Universal Music. In restitution for price fixing, they agreed to pay a $67.40 million fine and distribute $75.70 million in CDs to public and non-profit groups but admitted no wrongdoing. It is estimated that customers were overcharged by nearly $500 million overall and up to $5 per album. In the next portion, we'll be immersing ourselves in the realm of George Michael and examining its broader implications. British artist George Michael, signed to Columbia in the US and Epic Worldwide, advised Sony executives in 1990 that he would not be appearing in music videos to support his forthcoming album, Listen Without Prejudice Vol. 1. Michael then accused Sony of not promoting the album at all. He sued in the UK in 1992, asking to be released from his contract. Sony ultimately prevailed in the courts in 1994, but Michael's contract was bought out by other labels. Some 11 years later, Michael licensed tracks to Sony for release. Let's now enter the realm of Michael Jackson and Tommy Mottola and discover the fascinating stories it has to tell. The release of Invincible was preceded by a dispute between Michael Jackson and Sony Music Entertainment. Jackson had expected the licenses to the masters of his albums to revert to him sometime in the early years, after which he would be able to promote the material however he pleased and keep the profits. However, clauses in the contract set the revert date years into the future. Jackson discovered that the attorney who had represented him in the deal had also been representing Sony. He was also concerned that for years Sony had been pressuring him to sell his share in its music catalog venture. He feared that Sony might have had a conflict of interest, since if Jackson's career failed, he would have had to sell his share of the catalog at a low price. Jackson sought an early exit from his contract. In July 2002, Jackson alleged that the then Sony Music chairman Tommy Mottola was a devil and racist who did not support his African-American artists, using them merely for his own gain. He charged that Mottola had called his colleague Irv Gotti a fat nigger. Sony refused to renew Jackson's contract and claimed that a promotional campaign had failed because Jackson refused to tour in the United States. Get ready for an enlightening exploration as we dig into prosecution of copyright infringement and understand its role in the broader context. In May 2012, Sony Music filed charges against the website IshHunt. The plaintiff's claims in the court document filed at the Supreme Court of British Columbia read, the IshHunt websites have been designed and are operated by the defendants with the sole purpose of profiting from rampant copyright infringement which defendants actively encourage, promote, authorize, induce, aid, abet, materially contribute to and commercially profit from. In February 2016, In a lawsuit filed at a California federal court, Sony Music Entertainment and its associated brands Arista Records and LaFace Records, formerly owned by Bertelsmann Music Group, accused Belgian radio aggregator Radionomy, owned by Universal Music Group's parent Vivendi, of copyright infringement. As we enter this new chapter, let's navigate the complexities of Kesha v. Dr. Luke and 2016 boycott and unravel its multifaceted nature. In February 2016, 100,000 people signed an online petition in less than 24 hours, calling for boycott of Sony Music and all other Sony-affiliated businesses after rape allegations against music producer Dr. Luke were made by musical artist Kesha. Kesha asked a New York City Supreme Court to free her from her contract with Sony Music, but the court denied the request, prompting a widespread public and media response. Let's now venture into the realm of flagship record labels and explore the fascinating intricacies it holds. Columbia Records, RCA Records, Epic Records, Arista Records. Welcome to the next segment, where we explore genre-limited record labels and its significance in our journey. Country music: Sony Music Nashville, Columbia Nashville, RCA Records Nashville. Dance electronic music: Epic Amsterdam's Records, co-distribution with Universal Music Group, EEM Records, Ultra Records, Ministry of Sound, Liquid State joint venture. Christian Dispel Music Prevalent Label Group, RCA Inspiration Kingdom Life Records, Digiunta Records. Latin: Sony Music Latin, Classical Yos Music, Sony Masterworks, Sony Classical Records, Milan Records, Portrait Records, RCA Red Seal Records, Oak Records, Flying Buddha, Masterworks Broadway, XXIM Records, Blues Music Blind Pig Records, Pop Music Disruptor Records, Rock Music and the Century Records, Metal Music Century Media Records, Music for Nations, Progressive Music Inside Out Music. Moving ahead, let's uncover the hidden gems within others and discover their significance. Sony Music, Columbia Records UK, Relentless Records, Black Butter Records joint venture, Dream Life Records, Insanity Records joint venture, Magic Star Robots plus Humans since '93, Sony Music Nashville UK, WEAIBLK joint venture, District 18 Entertainment joint venture, Heavy Muscle joint venture, Sony Music Entertainment India, Sony Music India, Sony Music South. Distributed labels: Quill Vision Records, Megaforce Records, Metal Blade Records, Rhymers Entertainment, Robbins Entertainment, Shrapnel Records, Third Man Records, 30 Tigers, ABC Music, Big Brother Recordings, Heist or Hit Records, Mellow Music Group, Abbey Grand Records. Catalog Legacy Recordings, Follow That Dream Records, Louder Than Life Records. International L'Oreal Records, Intel. Duster Records, Intel. Relentless Records, Some Liver. Independent Music Distribution, Orchard, IODAWALXE. Let's now turn our gaze towards previously affiliated labels and explore the fascinating connections it has to offer. 19 recordings previously through BMG and RCA Music Group, now distributed by BMG Rights Management. If Gem recordings previously through Columbia Records, now part of Universal Music Group. Loud Records previously through Zoo Entertainment, then RCA Records, and later Columbia Records, now a new company called SRC Records through Universal Music Group. Chaos Recordings Brazil, previously part of Columbia Records, now dissolved. The Work Group previously through Epic Records, now dissolved. Date Records previously through Columbia Records, now dissolved. Aware Records, now part of Universal Music Group through Republic Records. Pipe World Entertainment previously through Columbia Records. Rock Nation previously through Columbia Records, now distributed by Universal Music Group. Nick Records previously through Sony Music, now dissolved. The Echo label owned by BMG Chrysalis, now distributed by Warner Music Group. Volcano Entertainment previously through Zomba Label Group and later RCA Records, now dissolved. RED Music, now dissolved. Psycho Music previously through Sony Music UK, now dissolved. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update from my channel.